And,
Yeah.
So I'd like to I'd like to welcome Earle Shettleworth
Right.
to our virtual presentation tonight. We've had a few of these over the past 18 months of pandemic, and this may be one of the good things that's come out of the pandemic is the ability to do these presentations at any time of the year, at the comfort of your home, and we're going to continue doing that. So with that, let me introduce Earle, and we'll get going. So up to you, Earle.
Very good. Thank you very much. So it's a pleasure once more to be with the Chebeague Historical Society, the Chebeague Island Historical Society. And this evening, we're going to take a little different tour through Maine history with a lecture called The Land and Sea of Three Maine Women Photographers, the real photo postcards of Thurza Foss, Minnie Libby, and Josephine Townsend. Now, none of these ladies are household words in Maine history. In many ways, I discovered them through my longtime interest in collecting Maine postcards. And as we get into the lecture, I'll actually explain to you in a couple cases that I myself really didn't know who a couple of these ladies were until I began to decode the postcards. But what we want to bear in mind for broad themes is two things. One is that, of course, photography comes to America in 1839 through daguerreotypes and a little bit later ambrotypes before the Civil War. And most of the photographers up until after the Civil War are men. There's very few women known to have done photography. And most of photography is very technically challenging in those early years, but in the 1880s, there is a major discovery, and in part, it is just a discovery by the Stanley brothers originally from Kingfield, who are then working in Lewiston as photographers, and they are the famous Stanley twins who later take the resources that they gain from selling the patent rights for a dry plate that makes it possible for photographers to take pictures out in the open and not have to have a sort of a developing laboratory with them, but to come back and develop them later on. So the Stanley brothers are key in developing the dry plate that enables people to go out and take pictures more easily. And then, of course, they sell the rights to George Eastman of Eastman Kodak in the 1890s, and then turn around and use the money to develop their automobile, the Stanley Steamer. But a byproduct of this is the first woman that we will look at. If we could now switch to the screen share, David.
Here we go.
Okay. This very striking portrait is a self-portrait by Chansonetta Stanley Emmons, who is the sister of the Stanley brothers. And she was married very early in life and then lost her husband. She did have one daughter. They had one daughter. And she was a native of Kingfield and was very close to her brothers. And they said, "We are so successful that we will support you for the balance of your life, you and your daughter. And by the way, you might need something to distract you from the loss that you've suffered. And so we will teach you photography." And so as a result, Chansonetta Stanley Emmons actually developed into one of the great New England photographers of the late 19th, early 20th century. Next, please.
Just figuring out how to do it.
Okay, that's fine. No rush.
There we go.
She specialized in these wonderful portraits of people in the Kingfield area or in the greater Franklin County area. She captured rural Maine as it was changing in the late 19th and early 20th century. This is called Resting in the Old Chair Seat, West New Portland, Maine, photographed about 1901. This old farmer just resting from his labors. Next, please. She also aimed her camera at many of the beautiful landscapes of Western Maine. And this is Freeman Ridge in Freeman, Maine, around 1900 on a wintry day. And you can see how skilled she was in creating landscape photography. Next, please. Now, another very important woman photographer connected with Maine in the late 19th, early 20th century is a woman named Emma Lewis Coleman. Born in Boston, she summered in York in the 1880s and took photographs to illustrate the novel Deep Haven, written by her close friend Sarah Orne Jewett of South Berwick. Coleman's photographs are strongly influenced by the French Barbizon painters, whose lush landscapes and idealized views of farmers and rural life provided a nostalgic counterpoint to the industrialized and urbanized society of the late 19th century. And here she's showing a photograph called The Potato Harvest at Cider Hill, York in 1883. Next, please. A third important woman photographer of this period is Emma D. Sewell of Bath. Born in Bath, she married the famous shipbuilder Arthur Sewell, who launched 95 vessels in a 40-year period. Her photography covered the period 1884 to 1900, and she is a contemporary of Emmons and Coleman. Here we see her beautiful photograph from 1895 called Fording the River, in which she received the award for greatest general excellence at the Boston Camera Club that year. This was taken in York. Next, please. And finally, we have another view by Emma Louise Coleman, Woman in a Punt Crossing Chase's Pond, York, 1885. Next, please. And we end with this photograph, very similar to the first one we saw by Chansonetta Stanley Emmons. Here we have an elderly lady doing her knitting in her kitchen by her window. It's from Emma Sewell, about 1900. Next, please. So I've shown you the work of these three very well-known Maine women photographers, Emmons and Coleman and Sewell, to give you some background about the fact that there were these really eminent women photographers of this period. The three ladies that we're going to concentrate on tonight are in many ways just the opposite. Their work survives largely through real photo postcards. In 1898, the US government passed a law called the Private Mailing Act. And this meant that anyone could produce a postcard as long as it had a picture on the front and nothing on the back. It had to just be plain on the back, because the Private Mailing Act allowed only for the address, and you weren't supposed to put a message either on the front or the back. Although, as you can see from this real photo postcard from 1905 by Thurza Foss that she sent to her daughter, she certainly wrote a message, and the Postal Service pretty much looked the other way. The whole idea was that these postcards were sent for a penny, and you really weren't supposed to send a message unless you spent 2 cents for a stamp. In any case, Thurza Foss is our first woman photographer that we look at in depth. She was born in the Somerset County town, very rural town of St. Albans, the daughter of Thomas and Hannah Merriman, who had come to the farm in Somerset County from Harpswell. She married Howard Hurd, a local farmer, in 1876 when she was only 16. In 1882, her husband, this is incredible, her husband was murdered by his brother Eugene in a dispute over their hayfield. Thurza remarried in 1884 to Frank Foss, a Civil War veteran and farmer 20 years her senior. After Frank's death in 1900, she began to take photographs to help support her family and supplement her farming income. She produced photo postcards of her town, Harmony, and other surrounding towns for 10 years between 1905 and 1915. When Thurza Foss died in 1937 at the age of 77, the Bangor Daily News noted that she was a member of the Grange and the Woman's Club. The paper stated, quote, "She will be missed in the community as she was always ready to help one in need." The first of these pictures of her photo postcards is a lake with an observation tower in Harmony taken in 1905 with a card sent to Thurza by her daughter, to her daughter Clara, saying, "How do you like my homemade postal?" Next, please. The next few views will show this wonderful photographic record that she made on these real photo postcards between 1905 and 15 of her community, Harmony. This is a general view of Harmony Village about 1910. Next, please. Here is downtown Harmony. And we have this handwritten legend, Main Street Harmony, which is a mixture of very simple vernacular commercial buildings and very simple vernacular houses in the background. The sign on the building, which is very much in need of paint in the lower left, is Tibbetts, Caskets and Robes. Next, please. Here's another angle of a view of downtown Harmony. I believe this is actually looking in the opposite direction with the old meeting house in the upper left in the background. Now, many of her postcards are captioned with these very simple imprinted letters on the lower part. And here she's abbreviated the word village, V-I-L-L, Harmony, Maine, and then she signed it T.E. Foss. Now, I'm embarrassed to admit that as I began to find these wonderful views of Harmony at postcard shows over the years, I just assumed that T.E. Foss was a man. And then when I began to do the research, I discovered, to my fascination, that it was Thurza Foss, the local lady who was creating these wonderful views. Next, please. Here's a view on the way out of Harmony. You see, so many people sort of bent the rules on these postcards to the point where in 1907, the federal government changed the rule so that you had a divided back in which you could use one side, the right-hand side for the address and the left-hand side for the message. But here, prior to that, we have, "Dear cousin Mariah, I will send you a postcard of our town from Alta." Next, please. Now there's a section of Harmony, a village known as Mainstream, Maine. What could be more mainstream? And this is a view of Mainstream in the winter. I've often thought this would make a wonderful Christmas card. And of course, here again, we have, in this case, she's just using her initials TEF at the lower right to sign the photographic postcard. And somebody has put an O and an X on top of two of the houses. So there must be on the back some kind of a message indicating what those were. Next, please. And then another lovely winter scene, again in Mainstream in Harmony, Maine, little store at the left and little village house at the right. Next, please. Now through the village of Harmony runs Higgins Stream. And this is a lovely view showing some of the old mills along the river, culminating in the dam just in the background, center right. Next, please. And here's that dam with an old mill at the left, which looks a little the worse for wear. Next, please. And then this wonderful view called Driving Logs on the Higgins, meaning the Higgins Stream, Harmony, Maine. And of course, we know that the rivers and streams all through Maine, all through the 19th and well into the 20th century were used for log drives to get the logs down to the sawmills for processing. Next, please. And here's a wonderful view, Randall's Apple Pickers at Work, October 1911. And look at the range of ages of the people working, the young man in the center, and then people of older age. Next, please. Now, railroads started to be built in Maine in the 1830s and 40s, but the train didn't get to Harmony till 1912. And it apparently was quite an occasion because Thurza was there with her camera. And this is called First Passenger Train, August 19th, 1912, Harmony, Maine, as it steams into town. Next, please. Here is a wonderful scene, the newly built railroad station, and the caption is, "Waiting for the first ride, August 1912, Harmony." This was the first opportunity probably for some people to get out of Harmony. Next, please. And here's the crowd at the railroad station on that important day in Harmony's history. And note the wonderful row of ladies in their summer whites. The train station is in the background along with the train. Next, please. So she's really a master at capturing these local events. This is the 4th of July celebration in Harmony in 1913. And what's going on here, you may wonder, these people in this sort of buggy type affair, and then the man on the horse and the lady, all of them with masks on. This was really a 4th of July tradition that went back to the period just after the Revolution and continued at least through the 1920s in many Maine towns and cities, called the Horribles Parade or the Ancients Parade, in which people would dress up in costumes, much like they would at Halloween, and parade on the 4th of July. And so this is actually a Horribles Parade in Harmony. My mother, who was born in Portland in 1905, could very well remember growing up in Portland on that the July 4ths were characterized in part by the Horribles parades. Next, please. Here's another view where we have the man at the right with his ox cart with a mask on, and then these people in the carriage seem to be a little bit more civilized. I don't think they're part of the Horribles, but they're part of the parade. Next, please. We're just going to take a quick look as we leave Thurza's work at some of the buildings in Harmony. This was probably the tallest building in Harmony. This was the Oddfellows Hall, which she photographed in 1916. Next, please. And oh yeah, this is the church in the mainstream part of Harmony. Next, please. And finally, she did reach out a little bit beyond Harmony for her photo postcards. This is the next town over, Athens, in Somerset County, and this is Somerset Academy in Athens, 1906. A very handsome little brick Greek Revival academy building that's still standing today. Next, please. Now we move to our second photographer, Minnie Libby, known as Miss Libby. She lived from 1863 to 1947, and we see her as a young woman, probably a self-photograph underneath an apple tree in Western Maine. Known professionally as Miss Libby, Minnie Libby pursued a lifelong career as an artist and photographer in her native town of Norway, Maine, in Oxford County. After studying painting at the Museum School in Boston, she returned to Norway to learn photography from a veteran photographer, John U.P. Burnham. When Burnham moved his business to Kennebunk in 1885, Miss Libby established her own studio the next year with the assistance and encouragement of her father, a prosperous carriage maker. From 1886 to 1946, all those decades, portrait work and postcards paid her bills, giving her the freedom to create scenic prints, which she tinted to look like watercolors and oil paintings. She also produced photographs of staged dramatic scenes. During the end of her career, she received national recognition in a feature article in the 1940 Life magazine entitled The Village Photographer. Next, please. Here is Minnie Libby in her Norway studio as she was photographed for her feature article in Life magazine in 1940. Two brothers, George and Freeland Howe of Norway, are her subjects. Returning to my mother for a moment, if I may be personal, she graduated from Colby in 1927, and her first teaching job was at Norway High School, and she lived in Norway for a year, 1927 to 28. And she said Norway was one of the most colorful places in the 1920s because she could remember people like the Howe brothers, who were mineralogists. They prospected for the minerals of Western Maine, and she remembered Miss Libby. She remembered Vivian Akers, the painter, and so on. It was a lively place in the 20s. Next, please. Miss Libby apparently loved children, and she used them often in some ways to advertise her studio. This is a advertising photograph that she made in 1886 called The Little Fisherman, which was Miss Libby's first business card showing Bert Hosmer at 5 years old. Next, please. Here's another staged photograph called Little Coal. And there was always this theme in 19th century literature and in theater and all of the poor orphan girl who roamed the streets, just finding enough coal to keep her warm during the winter and so on. And this is part of what this picture, this photograph is about. And of course, she calls it Little Coal, C-O-L-E, but obviously there's a double entendre there with coal, C-O-A-L, 1886. Next, please. And here's another delightful child portrait in her studio. Ed Cummings of Norway at the age of 12, posing with his 2 dogs and his cat. Next, please. Now, her bread and butter in the earlier days, in the 80s and 90s, was these very formally staged, formally posed studio portraits, of which she and other photographers of her time in Maine in the 1880s and 90s There were thousands of these made. This was called a cabinet photo, and they were usually put in large plush family albums. Oftentimes, unfortunately, unidentified, although in this case, we know that this is a local young man called Hollis Dingley. Next, please. She also specialized in family portraits. And this is Emil Hermes, who was a European immigrant who came to Norway to be a baker. And this is the studio portrait of he, his wife, and his son and daughters. And this again is the classic late Victorian studio family portrait. Next, please. Here is her first advertising photo postcard in which she features a silhouette of herself, Miss Libby, photographer, cordially invites you to the opening of her newly fitted cottage studio, lately purchased by her, a fine exhibit of art studies and new styles of photographic portraits have been prepared to make your entertainment worthwhile. And she uses not only the silhouette of herself to illustrate the photo postcard that she sends out to potential visitors and clients, but also this lovely study of her father, the carriage maker, with the cat on his lap. Next, please. And here's a close-up of that portrait of her father reading the Boston Journal with his cat. And I'm fascinated by the dynamic that must have existed between Miss Libby and her father, because in the late 19th century, there might not have been that many fathers who would have said, yes, I want to encourage you to be a photographer, and by the way, I'll set you up with a studio. Next, please. Here's another of her advertising cards using a child. We're showing a young girl here on the telephone making an appointment to have her picture taken. Hello, Miss Libby, I'm fixed to have my picture took. Can I come right off? Next, please. Most of her postcards, however, were scenic landscape postcards of Norway and the towns surrounding. This is a beautiful panoramic photograph taken about 1905 of Norway from a hillside above it. Next, please. Here is Main Street, Norway, looking very residential, very rural, a dirt street. And of course, she was an artist as well as a photographer. And so consequently, you find a few, not many, but you find a few of the photo postcards that she actually hand tinted. And this is the case with this one. So it's a black and white photograph. Then she takes very delicately, she takes her watercolor brush and tints it to give it a color effect. Next, please. Here we have a different kind of view from the sort of idyllic rural aspect of Norway residential area. We're looking at the shoe shops, which were the industrial face of Norway in the late 19th, early 20th century. Next, please. And then she just loved to create these artistic views of the main landscape at various times of the year. This is a beautiful photograph that she made into a postcard of the storm of March 24th, 1907. Next, please. Here she's branching out to other communities. This is Main Street in Cornish in Western Maine, about 1910. Some of the buildings along Main Street in Cornish on the right are still there, as well as the little park to the left. Next, please. Here we're looking at the park, and in addition to that, there is this wonderful little Greek Revival building at the right, which was a local law office. Next, please. Here is the Congregational Church in Waterford, about 1915, a beautiful sort of late Federal, early Greek Revival church. This church later burned in the 1920s, but if you go to Waterford Flat today, that beautiful village in Western Maine, you will find that there is a replica of the church because people were so attached to this building that they hired John Calvin Stevens to replicate it for them in the 1920s after it was lost by fire. Next, please. An interesting view in Harrison of a chair factory. Looks like a mid-19th century industrial building. Next. A rural scene. Next. And she created novelty cards here with the pine cone and tassel, and the little poem, which she may very well have produced herself. Tonight across the senses steals the perfume of the pines, and dreams of thee come back to me, O motherland of Maine. Wonderful period doggerel. Next, please. I think, though, the most interesting group of real photo postcards that Minnie Libby created between about 1905 and 1915 were the remarkable pictures that she took at the Oxford County Fair each year. The ability to create these wonderful crowd scenes with all of this activity going on without a blur in her photograph shows that she had, you know, an excellent camera, an excellent lens, and a real eye for social activity. I'm going to go through these fairly quickly, but they're really a delight. This is the Oxford County Fair in South Paris in 1907. Next, please. A view of the fairgrounds in 1905. And I call your attention to two things. In the background is the racing track, and at the left is one of the many colorful canvas painted banners that were used to advertise the different acts and the different attractions. And for those of us who are old enough, we remember some of the county fairs of our youth where this was still going on. Next, please. Here, we're looking at the Oxford County Fair of 1906, and a wonderful message written below. Hello, Dawn, how would you like a ride on this Ferris wheel? Can you find me? How would you like to get into a crowd of 15,000 people? Here are some of them. So this is the Ferris wheel and the midway in the background. Next, please. And here we have the grandstand for the horse racing, or the different both the horse and the oxen pulls. And here she signs this very boldly: Oxford County Fair 07, Miss Libby, photographer. Next, please. Here we have another view of the Oxford County Fair, 1907. Next. This is a wonderful one from the fair of 1908. The Ferris wheel close up in the right, the midway beyond, and then we get one of these banners, painted banners for one of the acts, which ironically, her name is Minnie, and maybe she's focusing in on this in purpose. The act is called Wild Minnie, the Yucatan Wonder. So, next, please. And here we have the band in the lower left-hand corner. And again, she signs this Oxford County Fair 08. These photographers could produce these photo postcards in their own studios very quickly. We have cases, I don't know it specifically from Miss Libby, although I imagine it was the case, but I do know there was a photographer in Belfast in this same period who would attend a major event in the morning, photograph it, and have postcards available at the local drugstores and general stores by late afternoon of the same event. Next, please. And here's the Midway in 1909. And there at the left, we see the banners for all of the different acts. One of them, the one closest to us says the Wild West. Next, please. There's the band again in 1911. Next, please. Now we leave Miss Libby for our last woman photographer who created many wonderful real photo postcards. And she's a little bit younger than either Thurza or Minnie. This is Josephine Davis Townsend. Her dates are 1900 to 1981. And if you ask, you know, is she in costume in this photograph, this self-portrait? Yes, she is. She's posing as Mona Lisa in the 1920s. Born in New Harbor on the coast, the Round Pond area, Josephine Davis Townsend was a member of the Davis family, which was associated with Monhegan Island's fishing industry for several generations. As a young woman, Josephine became interested in photography and assisted the noted Monhegan watercolor artist Samuel P.R. Trisket in printing his glass negatives of the island and enhancing the resulting photographs with overpainted highlights. After Trisket's death in 1925, Davis carefully preserved his negatives. There were hundreds of these negatives, and ultimately they were acquired by the state. She was a talented photographer in her own right. During the 1920s and 30s, between the wars, she took many views of Monhegan, which she published as photographic postcards. These postcards were sold in the restaurant and gift shop, which she operated on the island, as well as her later gift shop at Pemaquid Point. Next, please. Josephine Davis Townsend took large numbers, probably hundreds, of beautiful photo postcards of Monhegan in the 1920s and 30s. This shows the Nereid, which was the little boat that went between Port Clyde and Monhegan. Today, of course, Port Clyde is one of the departure and return points for Monhegan, along with Boothbay Harbor and Round Pond. But the Nereid is literally coming into the harbor. The rock at the left is part of the rock formation adjacent to Manana Island. For those of you who know the harbor of Monhegan, you have Monhegan Island, which is about 1.5 miles across and about 1 mile wide, 10 miles out in the middle of the ocean off the coast of Maine. And then what creates the harbor is this miraculous geological formation of a smaller island adjacent to it that forms a natural harbor. Next, please. Here we see now that topography. We're standing on the porch of what is now the Island Inn, looking down the walkway to the dock. And the Nereid is docked there at the left of the dock. And in the background is what is known as Smutty Nose, which is the little rock formation, the little sort of island that forms the entrance to the harbor. And then behind it is the larger island of Manana. Next, please. Here's a lovely overview of the village of Monhegan, the harbor, and Manana. Um, Many of these landmarks that she captured in the 1920s and 30s are still standing today. The big hip roof house that is just center right, yes, thank you, that's it right there. That is one of the earlier houses on the island. It was built in 1826 by the Trefetherin family, who were active in the fishing business, not only on Monhegan, but also in Portland Harbor as well, both on Peaks Island and on what is now what was where it's where Fort Scammell is, and they were very active not only in catching fish, but also in sending boats down to Portland and to Boston to sell the catch as well. This house was a double house. It was lived in by two branches of the family. And along the way in the 19th century, it acquired the name The Influence. And at one point, there was a sort of an informal bar in the basement of The Influence. And there's a wonderful story, whether true or not, on Monhegan, where someone would ask, well, where is so-and-so? I can't find him. Oh, you'll find him under the influence. Next, please. Here's a nice view from the 30s, just a genre scene showing the center of Monhegan Village. At the right is the Island Inn, built in 1907. In the background are two of the more prosperous fishermen's houses. And then to the left are the two of the shop buildings that were built in the 1920s as the tourist industry expanded. Those are both still in use today as shops. The one at the left is the Lupin Gallery. Next, please. Here's, again, you really get the sense of her understanding of the geography and the architecture of the island and the wonderful way in which she interprets it photographically. Here's a simple fisherman's cottage of the 1840s, a little cape with a little addition to the right, and it's adjacent to another early Cape-style house at the right, and then in between is one of the fish houses on the shore. Next, please. Here, an artistic photograph of a woman sitting on her doorstep with her cat. Next, please. And here, a very nicely composed photograph of the old fish houses at Fish Beach on Monhegan. Most of these are still, if not all of them, are still standing today. Fishing in Monhegan, although of course it occurred back in prehistoric times with the Native Americans and also in colonial times, but fishing in a commercial way on Monhegan really didn't get underway until after the Revolution. And some of these simple wood shingled vernacular fish houses, some of them actually go back to the late 18th, early 19th century, and they're still in use today, not so much as fish houses, but as artist studios or as summer homes. But this just gives you a sense of her wonderful sense of place and how she could compose a photograph. Next, please. Here, a view from Fish Beach with some of the fishermen in their dories, and it's a very foggy day in the harbor. That shadow in the background at the right is Manana Island. Next, please. And here, a winter storm hitting the bathing beach. There are two major beaches on the shore of Monhegan. The Fish Beach, which is still an active commercial beach, and then the bathing beach, or the swim beach as they call it, but not so on a day like this. And up in the upper right-hand corner is the Island Inn, and the waves are just crashing in over the buildings. Next, please. Here, an artistic photograph showing sunset with Manana in the background through the pine trees. Next, please. And another lovely sunset view with a vessel in the foreground. Any of you who have been to Monhegan know that with it being 10 miles out into the ocean, there are very dramatic sunsets. There's a very interesting sort of natural combination of forces that create climatic forces that create some wonderful sunsets there. Next, please. And here's another of these dramatic wave scenes. This is the surf at Lobster Cove, and at the right is the Sarah Kent Cottage. Now, this cottage is still very much with us today. Rockwell Kent, who's one of the major American artists of the 20th century, went out to Monhegan to paint in 1905 and spent the better part of the next 5 years as an artist out there, along with, he had an architectural background, so he also designed and built cottages on Monhegan. And in 1908, he designed and built this simple shingle-style cottage at Lobster Cove, right by the cliffs, for his mother, Sarah Kent. Jamie Wyeth, with the proceeds, still in his teens, with the proceeds of his first exhibitions in New York, selling his watercolors, bought the Sarah Kent Cottage and has remained, it has remained in his possession to this day. And he does spend time there in the spring and in the fall, but then during the summer, he paints on Southern Island off Port Clyde. But I had the privilege of visiting him there a couple times, and it's a very special place. Next, please. Here's a very dramatic photograph. This is the Pemaquid, which was a fishing boat that went onto the rocks at Lobster Cove in Monhegan. Next, please. And here is the Pemaquid being towed off the rocks. This would be in the 1930s. Next, please. For those of you who know the topography of Monhegan, there really are 3 or 4 major features. The first is the village and the harbor, which we've seen. At the southern end of the island is a sort of low rocky beach known as Lobster Cove. And this is where the surf comes in, pounds in and day out during the year. And this is a view of the surf coming in at Lobster Cove. Next, please. And this is a close-up of surf at Lobster Cove. Next, please. Now, on the outer side of the island, the side facing out to the open ocean, or when you're standing on the cliffs, some people will say to you, well, the next stop is the Canary Islands. There are these great headlands that have heights of as much as 150 to 160 feet. And the 2 primary headlands are Whitehead and Blackhead. And here we see the surf coming in on the headlands on a foggy day. Next, please. This is a wonderful photograph of Whitehead, which is one of the headlands between this ravine of rock that's on its way toward the headlands on the shore. Next, please. And this is Blackhead. with the surf coming in and the rocks between Whitehead and Blackhead. Blackhead is the father of the two headlands. Next, please. And so as Minnie Libby recorded the Oxford County Fairs of the early 20th century, so Josephine Davis Townsend created photographs of a summer carnival on Monhegan in 1938, in which, among other things, two men dressed up as an elephant, or something that might pass as an elephant. Next, please. And here was the master of ceremonies for the summer carnival, the ringmaster. Next, please. And finally, we have this nice photograph by Josephine Davis Townsend of the lighthouse, which stands on Lighthouse Hill, the highest promontory on Monhegan. The lighthouse was established on Monhegan initially in 1824, and the first lighthouse was rather poorly built of rubble stone. And so in the early 1850s, it was replaced by this beautifully designed and crafted granite tower that was designed by Alexander Paris, one of the leading architects in New England. And so the light is still in service today, although the keeper's house and the tower have been transferred to the ownership of the Monhegan Museum. And just take a minute to talk about the Monhegan Museum, because it is in a way a sister museum to your wonderful museum on Shebeag. The beginnings of preserving Monhegan and its history began in the 1950s. It's little known, but at the turn of the century, the great inventor Thomas Edison discovered Monhegan, and he and his wife and his family would come here to summer. It was very low key. He wasn't seeking any publicity. And his son, Charles Edison, also fell in love with the island. And in the 1950s, he purchased all of the open and forested land, all of the natural area of Monhegan, and created the Monhegan Associates as a land trust. And out of that then came the Monhegan Museum in the 1960s. At some point, they separated in a very friendly way, and there is the Monhegan Associates that looks after the land trust. And then there's the Monhegan Museum, which is housed in both the keeper's house, the lighthouse, and also a replica of the assistant keeper's house, where the art museum is housed, and the keeper's house is where the history museum is. And if you've been to Monhegan, or if you're going to Monhegan in the summer, these are very special places. They have excellent exhibits. Although I will say the Shebeag Island Historical Society has some equally handsome and professional exhibits as well. And I'm not just saying that because I'm talking to you. Next, please. So as I got into this topic, I discovered that there were a number of other women in the early 20th century who plied the trade of taking photographs and making them into postcards. It was a short-lived activity. It lasted from the early 1900s to World War II. But in that time, they created very important records of the life and times of their surroundings and their communities. And this is a photographic postcard by another of these ladies who were just beginning to learn about Nettie Cummings Maxim of Bethel. And this is a view of Locks Mills in Oxford County. Next, please. And this is a real photo postcard that Nettie Maxim took of the Locks Mills railroad station. So I end our journey through real photo postcards and women photographers with just the thought that, you know, the rich history of Maine is just all around us to be discovered. And those things that we often take for granted, like a real photo postcard, can actually open up a whole new chapter in Maine's history. And that's certainly the experience that I had with researching these three women that we talked about tonight. And I look forward to continuing to learn more. Thank you very much.
And thank you, Earle. That was fascinating, and you'll notice that our audience is applauding. So
Oh, thank you.
virtual applause, and hands in the air too. At this point, we'd like to open the floor, if you will, to any questions, comments that people
Sure.
have.
I'm happy to try to field questions. Yes.
Yeah, just actually just go down to your reactions down on the bottom of your screen and click on the raise hand where it says raise hand, and then I'll be able to recognize you. Or just wave your hand in the air and I'll probably be able to see you.
We have waving hands.
And Gretchen, you're now unmuted, and so you can unmute if you
Thank you, because there was no way I was going to find whatever button you were directing me to. Earle, this was just terrific. I don't know that I would have expected so much history to have come through the postcards, and I take special interest because I've just this fall is the first time I've ever been to the Cumberland County Fair. So the county fair
Yes.
were great. But my question is about the 4th of July parades, the horribles.
Yes.
Do you know what the origin of the horribles concept was?
Well, I think that it starts with 4th of July parades after the Revolution. Maybe as early as the 1780s, more like the 1790s. And at that point, the Revolutionary veterans and maybe other townspeople would dress up in the old Revolutionary uniforms and parade. And then as the veterans faded away, in the 18 teens and 20s and so on, the tradition continued with people just dressing up in old clothes, whether they were uniforms or just old clothes. There's about to be published a wonderful book on this whole issue by Jane Nylander. And Jane Nylander has a very distinguished career in New England history. She started at Old Sturbridge Village. She was the director of the Strawberry Bank in Portsmouth. And then she finished her career as director of what is now Historic New England in Boston. And she has written a book on New England parades and gatherings from the Revolution to the early 20th century. And so I think she'll be able to explain the horribles probably a little better than I can, but that's the general view. And I cherish the fact that, my mother told me about them, that it was still going on in the 19 teens and 20s, so.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Anybody else? Comments, questions?
David, I raised my hand, but I'll
I
just
see your hand.
start.
Thank you, Donna.
Well, so we had horribles on Shebig too.
Oh, great. Yeah.
Ray Hamilton, who lived to be 103, grew up on the East End near the hotels. And he said that it was, sometimes they would start at like 6 or 7 o'clock in the morning, and they'd be all dressed up, and a lot of the hotel guests would be dressed up. And, he would watch them walking up the road and, in these costumes. And on Shebig, they had something they called field days. And we have some incredible pictures that we just discovered them actually while we were collecting pictures for our next exhibit, Growing Up on Shebig. We have a family brought in an album, and I had never seen these pictures before. And there's in one of those parades, there's a house behind it that looks like it had a cupola on it, and it burned with the hotel, the original hotel. And so you would think you were in Portland when you see this picture. And there's this little, when you blow it up, enlarge it, and we did it on the computer screen because we have like a 28-inch screen. There's a little girl on the top of this float. She's way up in the air on, they've built some infrastructure, and she's got like a towel tied around her belly to hold her on there. So I'm thinking we're going to use that in the exhibit because it shows how they kind of use children. But some of these people, the masks that they have are incredible.
That's wonderful, Donna. Yeah. And so your next exhibit is growing up on Shebig. Is this child life on Shebig?
Yes.
Oh, that's a wonderful theme, really. Yeah.
Yeah.
I look. Will that be your next summer's exhibit? We
Yes,
hope.
it was supposed to be 2020.
Yeah, I know. Yeah.
And Graffiteria does our photographs, and they got behind because they had so much business, and the whole committee stayed home. They wouldn't get out. I mean,
Right.
we had a lot of issues. But now we have most of our photographs, and we have some almost life-size children. I think you'll enjoy it next summer.
Oh, that's wonderful. Well,
if we can live long enough to get it done.
Well, again, largely because of the real photo postcards that I collected so many of them for the state over the years when I directed historic preservation, I began to see this wonderful pattern in the real photo postcards of a whole range of activities and life for children in Maine that was everything from a gymnastics class at Camden High School in 1925, various junior high and high school athletic teams, but also child labor, little boys working in the field, picking potatoes and so on. And I actually put together a lecture on that of child life. One of the most exciting finds that I made, I was at a postcard show going through, as you do, hundreds and hundreds of postcards. And all of a sudden, here was a postcard of a high school basketball team, very nicely posed. And one of the ladies was holding a basketball, and it said SHS 1916. And I looked quickly and I thought, oh my God, one of those ladies is Margaret Shea Smith.
Wow.
In her basketball uniform. I knew that she played basketball for Skowhegan High School. And so it was a real photo postcard of her basketball team. So, and we forget that, women's sports were coming into their own in those days as well. My mother, in both high school and in college, both at Portland High and then at Colby, was very involved in women's basketball. So
we have some photographs there were several women who went to Westbrook Seminary from here. And,
yes.
And several of them played basketball. And so in their family albums, we have the pictures, and we found a newspaper clipping. One of them, of course, in those days, even when I was in high school, you couldn't go the whole length of the court unless you were a rover. They had different rules, but she scored all 25 points. The Westbrook beat another team 25-0.
Oh my! And she did it all her own.
she must have been under the basket. Her name was Mildred Johnson, and But we have a photographer who did a lot of those real postcards, real photo postcards, and he came from Waltham, Massachusetts, and somebody here. His name was George Hicks.
Oh, great!
And we're going to have a picture of him in the exhibit because we have a whole section on we wouldn't have these pictures if these people hadn't taken, it's people holding cameras.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So anyway, so some of these real photographs that he did will be in that exhibit.
Wonderful. Well, I look forward to it because I always enjoy your exhibits. They're both beautifully produced and also very informative. So.
Anybody else?
Oh, yes, Jane Frizzell's got her hand up.
I think,
Yeah,
yeah.
I just want to say, Earle, my mother was also born in 1905 and went to Portland High School. So,
Oh my goodness.
What was her maiden name?
Knutson.
Okay.
Knutson. She was Esther Knutson.
I think I have a class book, a yearbook.
Yeah. I have her yearbooks also. Yeah. What was your mother's?
Alice Cleves, her name was.
Alice Cleves. Great. Yeah. That sounds very familiar. Portland High School was a wonderful experience for my mother. Her parents were immigrants from Denmark who came over in the 1890s, and they lived in the East End of the city. And she went to the North School. And when she got to Portland High, she said it was such a revelation because there were so many fine young women from all parts of the city who were there. And it was just a wonderful experience for her. It opened up worlds. And then in her junior year, her math teacher, Miss Hopkins at Portland High School, took her aside because she was very good academically. And she said, now, Esther, are you planning to go to college? And my mother said, well, I'm sorry, but, we don't have the money to go to college. And she said, well, don't worry about that. She said, now there are some nice girls who just graduated from Portland High, and they're already up at Colby because Miss Hopkins went to Colby. Miss Hopkins turned out to be a recruiter for Colby, and so she said, now there are these nice girls, and she said, I will arrange with them for you to spend a weekend with them at Colby. This was when she was a junior. And we'll get you a train ticket and everything, don't worry about anything. So my mother went up and she had a wonderful time, and Miss Hopkins took her aside afterwards and said, now, what did you think about Colby? And my mother said, well, it was wonderful. And she said, well, here's the application form. And my mother kept saying, well, yes, but, where's the money coming from? And she said, no, don't worry about that. She said, well, it turned out my mother was accepted. And even in those days, they had full scholarships for deserving students. Wow. It was $500 a year.
Whoa.
The president, Arthur Roberts, was given the discretion upon the faculty's recommendation and the recommendation of people like Miss Hopkins who were involved in the recruiting process to give young men and women scholarships if they were deserving. And that was a miracle, really.
Well, that's great. Wow.
All right. Anyone else?
Well, oh, yes.
John.
Right at the end, would it be possible to go back to that first train that came into Harmony?
Oh, boy.
I belong to a train club, and
oh, sure.
It would be great to take a picture of that.
Okay, can we do that, Dick? I'm happy to do it if
we can do that. And this whole presentation will be mine.
Oh, that's right too. It's going to be.
Let's see, which one? You wanted the train?
Oh, yeah. We need to go back quite a ways. Actually, it's
right to the beginning.
Yeah,
it's to the very beginning. Yeah,
okay.
That's okay.
Let me. Now, see how it goes.
Well, we get a reverse view of the lecture here.
Yeah.
Those waves were incredible. It's so hard to take pictures of waves.
Oh, isn't it? It's amazing.
I mean, her waves were incredible.
The amazing part of Mohegan when I was up there was looking down from those cliffs
Oh,
of the top of Seagulls. I'd never done that before.
oh, it's pretty.
That's
It's pretty.
one right
There
there.
you go. There you go. Right there. Yep.
All right, hold it just a second.
Sure.
Yes. Neat picture. There you go.
John, I could do a screen capture of that and email it to you.
Right, I got it, I believe. So,
Okay.
thank you. And that's the first train coming into Harmony.
That's right. August 19th, 1912. And they weren't planning on too much business because they've got a baggage car with some passengers in it. And then they've got another passenger car, and that's about it.
Just
When did the knitting mill start up there? Do you know? In Harmony?
I
later.
don't know. I
Yeah,
don't know.
It must have been
Yeah.
a later period of time. I mean, I guess it's still going, actually.
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
believe it is.
Probably one of the very few now. yeah.
Not knitting, actually creating the yarn, I guess. It's not- Bartlett, no. Yeah, I think that's. right.
Bartlett. Isn't it Bartlett in Harmony?
That's what I'm saying. It's just, it's a yarn mill, and I think it's still going. Pretty sure it is.
Well, again, I thank you for inviting me, and look forward to getting together again, maybe in the new year. So thanks so
Sounds
much.
Great. Thank you, Earl.
So far
It's
away,
excellent.
yeah.
Thank
Thank
you.
you.
everyone for
Right.
tuning in tonight, and it's been a pleasure, and tune in for the next one.
Very good. Thanks so much. And thank you, David.
Well done.